Ms. Pulliam and her team have worked tirelessly on this project, and so I'm excited for you to see the work, and I just want to thank her for all the work that she's done, because she's tremendous in what she does, and so I'm really excited for you to see what she's got. She's done a lot of outreach that she'll share with you as well, and so I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. Chair Hegarty, Vice Chair Swanson, Superintendent Taylor, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to share with you the initial draft of this year, of the 26-27 enrollment plan. As a quick update to what we've done for you materials-wise, in the assembly attachments, which should hopefully be going live soon, there are 5 separate attachments. The first is a copy of the presentation itself. The second, in response to feedback from the board, is a review packet of materials we've been sharing with you since March, so we won't have to go through all of them today. You have them there for your reference. And for any family or community members that might be joining us for the first time in this discussion, they can also refer to those to know that you've been having this discussion for a while now. In addition, we have an updated copy of the Public Engagement Summary Report. We created this for the first time last year, got it to you just in time for your public hearing, realized how valuable it was, so we're now getting it to you earlier in the process. So this does include a handful of updates. You'll see a revision section. Many sections were touched simply because we were updating participation numbers, so it's not substantive changes in most of the sections, but there are data points and a couple of summary statements that have been updated as a result of the closing of the most recent thought exchange on July 31st. In addition, we have historically included both of these 2 additional attachments. One labeled 4D is a copy of the detailed maps. These are PDF versions of the after maps, if you will, for the proposals that are included. Anybody who opens these on their computer can actually zoom in and see down to street level. So these are much more functional if you're trying to explore the map than perhaps the ones included in the slide deck. So we find these are helpful for parents and community members who want to do that more detailed review. And then 4E is a copy of some of the data reports that are baseline resets for us. Most of the growth projections, actually all of the growth projections, are based on the most recent forecast, which was done for the 2024 cycle. You received that presentation back in February. So this is just the foundational sets of data over the last couple of weeks that we've used to sort of recalibrate those forecasts based on current headcount. So that's what's in your attachments. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get rolling. So a special thank you to Glenn. As much as he's thankful for me, I'm thankful for him and his supervision and support, really, and encouragement. Our entire Office of Student Assignment team, our Geospatial Analytics team, our area superintendents, many principals, our long-range planning team, the facilities design and construction team, many partners in that planning group, and of course our parents and community members. But I would be remiss if I didn't have a special thank you for both Ms. Zulema Yanez and Ms. Corelli Tornow for their support in getting all of our communications together and ready for today's presentation. So for today, we will briefly, and I do mean briefly, I will use my speed voice, review the assignment planning process as well as our board policy 4150 as they relate to developing our annual student assignment enrollment plans. We will spend an extensive amount of time going over the initial staff recommendations that are included in this initial draft. Then we will quickly hit on some highlights of the timeline where we go from here, and then give you time to share any thoughts, comments, or questions before we go into our public engagement sessions related to this draft. As a reminder, this does align with the work of our strategic plan, specifically in our family and community engagement aims, both aims 6 and 12, as well as with our operational effectiveness aims, both aims 14 and 19. And now, for the first time, we are sharing with you the new enrollment proposal website. So the one that you see on the top line, 2026 enrollment proposal, went live about 8 minutes ago. And it contains all of the information and resources related to this initial draft. In addition, if families are looking for the address lookup tool, they'll want to visit this site. They'll find it there. If they're looking for information on the upcoming virtual information sessions, open house, that will be there, as well as other curated resources to help them understand and digest this plan. The lower site that you see, that's the one that we created a couple of years ago. That's the perpetual or perennial site that is constantly being updated. The two do cross-link to each other, so if you find yourself on one or the other, you can easily find the other information. But that's where families might want to go, or community members might want to go if they want a deeper dive into the planning process itself. And so quickly, again, I'm referring you to item 4B in your packets, so that if you wanted to look at that review material, just to refresh your minds. Back on March 4th, we came to you with an initial touch point to talk about public engagement. On May 6th, we came to you and talked about the goals for this year's plan. You had some additional questions, so we visited with you on May 20th and June 3rd to follow up on those specific talking points or concern points. And then on June 24th, we had a touch point to go over what we knew so far related to what we've heard from communities preparing for the plan. As you'll recall, we have roughly a six-step process. We're in step 4. We've been in step 4. We stay in step 4 for quite some time, but we're quickly advancing through the last few phases of step 4. And so then we'll jump into steps 5 and 6 and start the cycle all over again. So just a quick overview of how we arrived where we are today. We start with an enrollment forecast, which, as you can see, over the last 3 years has become more and more aggressive. In addition, we take that forecast, we distribute it across the county so we can have a better understanding of where that growth will occur across and throughout the county. Then we take some of that information and use it to project crowding for the coming school year. We did this back in the February-March timeframe, so this is respective to this current school year. However, it's still the projections because we have not hit any of our headcount days to be able to update these to show what the actual crowding is today. But based on these projected crowdings, the planning team was thinking, what can we do to support some of our over-enrolled schools as well as our underutilized schools that have available capacity. In addition, we work with our facilities design and construction team to understand better what's going on with our capital improvement program, to know what schools are opening, what schools might be undergoing renovation. I will briefly stop here and say that although Swift Creek will complete its renovations in time for the 26-27 school year, we're going to use a similar strategy that we did for both Bauckham Elementary and Fuquay-Varina Middle and just hold off a year. Let the new school effect kind of happen for that community, let the community settle into its new space before we come to you with any recommendations for expanding its base attendance area. It may not be necessary, or it may. So we're just going to give it 1 year before we do that. So you won't see recommendations for that in this year's plan. Similar with Fuquay-Varina Elementary completing its minor renovation projects, we'll wait a year and see how moving into the new space impacts the enrollment before coming to you with any longer term changes. Then we slide into step 4. We've completed the public engagement step for the spring portion. We've completed our review with you of the annual goals, and we're now in the thick of releasing to you the initial plan and then going through all of the processes that get us to final approval. We'll come back to this in just a moment. I do think it's important to share how we got here, at least within these steps. So we did conduct that public engagement. I just wanted to give you an update. As I mentioned when we met in June on the 24th, we still had a thought exchange that was ongoing and collecting feedback from the community. Thanks to our communications department, we kept messaging our community and they responded. We had over 894 additional participants participate in that particular thought exchange between the June time period and today, and they added an additional 738 thoughts. So it was really a much richer experience for our community members. We'll talk through some of those results in just a moment. In addition, some of the recordings that we posted had additional views as well. So recordings of those virtual information sessions that we held in May, we had an additional 74 views of those sessions leading up to today. So that's something that we think is important, that those assets are being used and they are being helpful to our family members. In addition, our website, starting at the top there, our digital assets, we're at a total of 5,007 page views altogether, which is an additional 236 views during that time period. To be expected, it's a little lower just because we're not in the throws, I imagine, today will knock that number out of the park. You'll also see the red footnote here, which will show up on all of the public engagement sections. All of the details on this are included in your public engagement summary report, so I would refer you to that for any detailed analysis and information. However, we did have one ongoing thought exchange that we didn't talk to you about. We just wanted to give you a quick opportunity to review the information. Not a lot of surprises. The core question that we asked the larger community was, as you think about school assignments, what do you value most about your student's current school? And what would you hope for in a school assignment? Just thinking broadly about what's important to you for your student to have a successful school experience. And so you'll see some common threads that we've seen in other conversations with our community. Distance was one of the top rated. These are the 3 top rated thoughts in this particular exchange. We want a school that's close to home. We hear you loud and clear. Proximity is important to a vast majority of our community. The school community, the sense of home away from home, feeling like they fit in, feeling like they're welcome, feeling that it's a safe place to be and to learn. I thought that was an interesting way to phrase that, and love that it got so much attention from our community and was so highly rated. In addition, the stability piece, and I think I did not pick and choose these. These are literally the 3 highest rated thoughts, and they're all slightly different, but tell the same story we've been hearing for the last 3 or 4 years. That keeping the same school assignment, having consistency, not only for the students, but for the families with their school relationships, is really important. So again, a total of just over 1,000 participants in this particular thought exchange, well over 18,000 total ratings of those over 900 thoughts. For your information, the thoughts had about a 20-to-1 ratio of ratings to thought, and that pristine number is 30. So that's really good. That means we had really good participation and a lot of people looking at each other's thoughts and comments. However, there was low alignment. So we have some polarization here. I might really like close, I might really like academic programming, and to me those are 2 separate things and maybe we don't agree. It's okay. It's not uncommon for us to see this at this point in the planning experience, but it lets us know that we are not a community of one, we are a community of many. Looking at the actual thoughts that were posted when we started doing the theming work to try to figure out how to categorize them, the 6 main themes that came up were quality of education, which you can see on the left of this particular screen, and if you're flipping quickly, we're on slide 18. You had school community and stability as another topic or category. Proximity to home had its own special standalone category. School calendar, and that could be a mix of all things, traditional, year-round, modified, but just concepts related to school calendar. Diversity and inclusion came up, as well as operational considerations. And I'll pause, because when we were reviewing this, my team was like, ooh, they care about operational efficiency? I was like, no. These are things like homework. These are things like before and after school care. These are school-based operational considerations. So they're slightly different from, we got excited, ooh, they care about how crowded the school, no. No. But as you can see, for quality of education, we had 479 total thoughts in that category, 434 in the school community and stability, 224 in the proximity to home, 179 in school calendar, 83 in diversity inclusion, and 31 in operational considerations. Once families and community members started rating those thoughts, the deck shuffled a little bit. The quality of education moved to that 3rd position. Nothing significant here. I can tell you the different rating values. But proximity to home really did get the highest rating of all the thought groups at a 4.1 average rating for the comments in this particular category. For school community and stability, again, no surprise, it was one of our top rated thoughts, a relative average of 4. And remember, this is on a scale of 1 to 5. Quality of education got a 3.9, so it's not a low value by any stretch. Diversity inclusion was 3.8, school calendar was also 3.8, and then those operational efficiency site-based logistics type concerns were a 3.3 when all the ratings were done. So what I'll share is that all of this provides insight, right? It's not a yes or no, it's not a survey, it's not a mandate per se, but it helps us better understand the unique experiences of our community members as we're preparing recommendations for you to review related to school assignments and school enrollment plans. What we're seeing is really no major shift. Stability is still important. Calendar continuity fits in that stability category. Cohort continuity fits in that stability category. Capacity management, that's probably more staff-driven than community-driven, but you do have some parents that are concerned about the size of classes or the number of students on campus, or The opposite side of that, being a school that's a little bit under-enrolled and not having sufficient resources to have all the types of positions they'd like to have to support their students. The policy guidance piece is more of a staff-driven. We have a policy that has 4 pillars. We acknowledge that our community is really raising that clarion call for proximity and stability, yet we have to balance that against the policy goals of student achievement and operational efficiency. So where we can find win-wins, we brought them to you. When we can't, we'll explain where we are. A quick review then, we reviewed those goals with you. I thought it was important to just remind everybody what we said we were going to do. We said we were going to bring to you a plan that has information for a new elementary school, its base attendance area, and any feeder pattern alignment or calendar alignment issues that need to be considered, as well as any domino impacts for nearby schools. Because when you open a school and you move a lot of students out of one school, that might be too many, and we might be able to backfill. So you'll see those recommendations. We did look at those completed renovation projects, and as I announced earlier, we won't have recommendations specific to those. We're going to let those sit for a year before we bring you any specific recommendations. As far as crowding and transportation, you will see recommendations related to this area. We do have some to address ongoing crowding, both within the new school opening and separately. And we also have some recommendations to help make more efficient transportation routes for our transportation department to support those goals. And then we also told you we had some carryover items in that sort of stability category based on what you approved for the 25-26 plan, and those are included in this draft. So we'll come back to this in just a moment, but I do want to say, you'll notice on here there's 3A. I don't want to bypass that letter right there, the review of public feedback. So at 3:30, the website went live. At 3:30, all that information was shared. Shortly after, or at about that time, we started sending the mass community message saying, hey, it's being presented. If you want to join in, the link to the YouTube was in the information as well, so they could just click on that and start watching us live, in addition to links to the website. We also have been working with our impacted principals. They have a principal toolkit with information that they can share directly with their family members at their schools, both in print and in email. So they've got both versions, and in English and Spanish language translations already provided. In addition, we'll be hosting virtual information sessions, an open house that will be live and in person, and we'll have recordings of everything that we do that's virtual so families can also participate asynchronously. Of course, we'll have a thought exchange going so that we can already start collecting, I'm sure it's getting hits now, and collecting information from families that may have questions or concerns, and we'll use that to drive our FAQ portion of our website. That will be regularly updated between now and October, and again between October and November. And of course, we'll update that public engagement report for you as you prepare for your public hearing on the 21st. So I'll tell you all that again later if you want to hear it. But I just wanted to say that that will all start, effectively starts today. We will come back to you and talk to you about captain overcrowded schools after we know what's officially approved in the enrollment plan to see where we've made some progress. You'll notice that several schools on this list were impacted by the 25-26 enrollment plan, so we're monitoring the impacts of that implementation to determine if any of these can be adjusted. Please know that we may be bringing to you with this conversation recommendations to add or remove students or schools from the list, perhaps to change the overflow school if that partnership has gotten a little heavy on one of the schools. And so anything in that bucket will be brought to you probably in December for an initial touch point, and then for further conversation in January, February for approval. We also wanted to draw attention to the fact that you did convert a school, approve a conversion for a school, Lake Myra Elementary, to go from track 4 only to multi-track due to the growth, the continued and ongoing and nonstop growth in that region. We did evaluate this particular board approval and realized that at this point, making adjustments to the base attendance area is probably not necessary because of the actual growth in the base itself. So you won't see any recommendations related to this change in the plan as well. We're going to let that calendar change take effect, let the enrollment growth that's happening in that region fill up the school, monitor that before we come to you with any potential expansions, let's say, of the base attendance area for that school. We don't think that it can support it. So all of the information that got us to today is on this website. Now, here we go. Did I do it fast enough?
Can I ask clarity?
Yeah, is this just about the process?
That's what you just said?
Yes.
Okay.
At the Lake Mower, you were saying that you don't think that it could support it changing to track 4?
No.
We don't think it needs additional base.
Changes.
We think
Okay.
the existing base attendance area will be sufficient to fill in all those extra seats that are being generated.
I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for that clarification.
Uh-huh.
All right. So what we hope you'll find today is that as we walk through the recommendations that are included in this initial draft of the 2026-27 enrollment plan, that you can hear me underscore for you that the recommendations are going to reflect both the data that we've carefully evaluated and the feedback that we've collected from our families and community members. We hope you'll see a balance between those two points of information and emphasis as we review the proposed changes. So again, the top website is where you go to find out information about the actual proposal. The bottom website is where you go just to learn more about how we got to this point today. We'll start with a quick overview of the schools that are impacted by base assignment changes. You'll see that it's a much reduced number of schools as compared to last year. We're only opening one elementary school, and the vast majority of the elementary base assignment change recommendations are related to the opening of that school. All of the ones that you see sort of in the lower southeastern corner of the map. Off to the far east of the map, you'll see a little area that's related to crowding in the east, and off to the west, you'll see sort of a blue area that's related to crowding in the west. So those are two separate recommendations, but everything else is related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore Elementary. In addition, you'll see at the middle school level, the only recommendations that are included here are twofold. One set to support the opening of Hilltop Needmore and create K-8 calendar and cohort continuity. In addition, you'll see some that are related to that other crowding recommendation that we're going to have on the east and west. And then a third element of the middle school recommendations is a follow-up to last year's approval of the change for certain elementary schools to come into Buckham on traditional that still had a year-round middle school. So this is to create K-8 and cohort continuity for those families. And then at the high school level, there's just a total of 4 high schools impacted. One set of schools is related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore and creating a K-12 cohort feeder pattern, as well as addressing some crowding issues. And the other is that follow-on to those Apex area recommendations for the 25-26 school year that needed a better feeder pattern going through K-12. One thing we have realized over the last several years is that 85% plus of the questions we get are about, so if my address is changed, what happens to my student? Do I have the ability to stay at my current school or not? Would I need to provide transportation? So we thought we would start with the recommendations for stability rules before going into the proposals themselves, because this really is where the rubber meets the road. How does this impact me and my family? What staff is recommending, based on what we've seen working well with the last couple of years with those expanded stability rules that you were able to support when we first opened Woods Creek Elementary, and now again for 25-26 Pleasant Plains, Bowling Road, and Rex Road Elementary, is that if a student and an address is being assigned into the new school, we'll have slightly more restrictive or conservative rules to ensure we have a healthy population to open the school with. So only 4th and 5th grade siblings would automatically be eligible for those stability transfers to stay at their current school should they choose so. This would be without transportation, as we're trying to route those buses now to the new school instead of to the old school. In addition, based on all that feedback we've received, and we get a lot of support, there's been a lot of support for this particular set of rules. Let those kindergarten through 3rd grade siblings not only come in with their 4th and 5th grade sibling, but go ahead and stay through 5th grade. And so that we're going to recommend that same set of rules that we've been operating for the last 2 assignment cycles. Families really seem to support it. Principals are able to manage it. They've already been crowded for a while, so just slowly changing that overcrowding to regular crowding seems to work okay. We do remind everyone that these requests would need to be submitted specifically during the stability transfer window. It's on all the slides. I won't say it every time. And that's just to ensure that this, because some of these schools are cap schools that we're going to be talking about, maybe not this set, but others, to ensure they get that seat before we start callbacks or before we start any other process. So all of these would be assured as long as they submit them during that window. We'll give you really specific details on these as we get closer to the approval date, because it's not germane at the moment. But it would be before the holiday break is our plan, just like we've been doing the last couple of years. The other thing I want to stop and note here is that A lot of families will then ask the follow-up question, okay, this works for the students I have and that one rising kindergartner that I have, but I've got a 3-year-old that'll come up in a couple of years. What happens to that student? Well, the good news is the regular transfer rules will support the family for that younger student. When that student's ready to join kindergarten, they'll be able to join a sibling per the normal rules, and they can put in their request during the regular transfer period. They won't have to participate in this particular process. So they're covered on all sides. Also, the benefit of the stability transfers is that if families put those transfers in that November, December timeframe, let a couple of months go by and realize, ooh, I don't think we can make carpool work, or, oh, our best friend has actually decided to go to the new school and I don't want to separate the students from each other that, really get along well, they can always put in a back-to-base transfer in that hardship window, and we can approve those without question. So it's best to go ahead and put it in the stability window when time comes, and then make those decisions later if you can't have it. Because once we get to the regular transfer window, if they're too crowded, if we're already hitting class size limits, we might not be able to approve them. The rest of the students then that are impacted by changes in this particular set of recommendations, because there's only the one new school opening is Hilltop Needmore. All the rest, we would follow what you've been permitting us to do for the last couple of cycles, which is all students at all grades that are currently attending a particular school. They're going from an existing school to an existing school, would be allowed to stay as long as they can provide transportation. Same rules about the kindergarten sibling. 6th grade will also work, and 9th grade will work. So if you don't mind, I'll kind of pop through these because it's the same basic rules at all 3 levels. And again, those regular transfer rules would support families for students that are a year or 2 behind this particular implementation year. So now, let's dive into some specific recommendations. We'll start with the opening of Hilltop Needmore. As you'll recall, Hilltop Needmore is currently serving as the home for Fuquay Marina Elementary while their campus is undergoing some minor renovations. So it is actually operational and functional. I took a tour of it just the other day. We're going to host our open house at the site since it's open. That way families can get a peek at the school that they're being assigned into. And so just as a reminder about where it's located, it's sort of in the, I guess it's still northern Fuquay, I guess that's what we would call it, in the Fuquay Marina area, near 401. So we're going to make a unique recommendation for you. We do recommend, as we have been, because this is the last of the elementary schools coming in this region, quite literally the last in this region for the foreseeable future, that we call it a multi-track year-round school, that you approve it as a multi-track year-round school. However, based on the needs today and calendar alignment issues in this region and feedback from community members and staff, we would ask that you allow us to operate it on track 4 only for its first few years. And if the enrollment and when the enrollment finally gets to a point where we need it to be multi-track, it's already pre-approved to be multi-track, and then we can just bring it to you to do that. We'll explain why when we get a little bit farther in, but the middle school alignment that we're seeking here would be Westlake Middle, which operates on a track 4. The students are coming out of schools like Banks and Westlake, which currently operate on a track 4. This would provide the most stability we can for families from a calendar perspective, while also giving us the flexibility as staff to use the extra seats in the future year. So for the first few years, the capacity would be 716, and when and if needed to flex to multi-track, it would be 924. The impacted schools at the base assignment area that would be used to identify addresses to assign to the school are Ballantyne Elementary, Banks Road Elementary, and Westlake Elementary. As you can see, Ballantyne is currently a multi-track year-round school. The other 2 are currently track 4 only schools. We have moderate crowding at Ballantyne projected for 26-27 and 27-28. We have significant crowding projected for Banks, part of the reason why Hilltop is needed. And then Westlake doesn't have those same crowding issues, so we'll talk through what we're going to do to support Westlake. For a point of reference for you on these slides, if it's a blue bar on this top row, that means this is if we make no changes. So if we left with the status quo, we didn't open the school and left these base attendance areas alone, this is the projected crowding. In addition to the opening of Hilltop Needmore, it creates an opportunity for a little bit of what we've used, I think the terms we've used are cascading or domino effects in the area, to kind of, like we did in the Holly Springs area last year with opening of Brex and Bowling Rose in the Fuquay area. So there are a handful of schools that we're going to impact because we were opening Hilltop Needmore. If we weren't opening Hilltop, we might leave them alone. So that's Middle Creek Elementary, Oak Grove Elementary, and Vance Elementary. 2 of these operate on track 4 only. 1 is currently a multi-track year-round school. You can see their capacities with trailers. I didn't point this out on the last screen, but that's the total capacity of the school with their trailers. By way of example, Middle Creek currently has 13 classroom trailers, so it's a significant amount for an elementary school. So we're not necessarily trying to use all of these seats, but the projected growth in the Middle Creek Elementary base, particularly one of its satellite areas, is really showing massive growth in the coming years, even with the trailers. So we're looking to provide some relief to the school. Vance also has about 5 trailers. Oak Grove has about 5 trailers. So you can see the difference between the crowding levels if you were to maybe subtract those trailers from the campuses. We're not quite ready to do that, is basically what I'm saying. All right, so the maps. It's been about a year since we've looked at these, so let's just take a moment to orient ourselves to how the maps are set up, and then we can more quickly go through the others. The map on the left represents what the current base attendance areas are for all of the schools impacted. The shading area is then the area that's being proposed to be impacted by whatever the reassignment move is. The map on the right then would show you, if you were to approve it as we're recommending it today, which we're not saying you will, but if you were, then these would be the new attendance areas for these schools based on the recommendations that are included today. The color coding lets you know which school is which color. We do see somewhat duplicates, but for your reference, if I start on the far right, Vance Road is the longer column that's sort of in blue. Banks is that pink colored right next to it. If I go in a little bit further, it's mostly Banks, a little bit of Westlake, a little bit of Ballantyne. That yellow then becomes the new Hilltop Needmore base attendance area. If I go back to my left map, the upper quadrant on the left, it's light, sort of a blue color similar to the Vance color, that's Westlake Elementary. The orangish yellow color on the middle-ish part of that map is Ballantyne Elementary, and that sort of tan color on the top left would be the Middle Creek Elementary. So hopefully that helps you figure out how to read the maps, and certainly we can answer any questions needed. Another thing that we've done is to add a layer to help you figure out, okay, so what are we talking about? So the area that's identified as 1 on the left is a portion of Westlake Elementary that we're recommending become part of Hilltop, basically because of transportation flow, egress, and just natural breaks between neighborhoods. It's a very small sliver. As you could see on the earlier slides, Westlake Elementary does not need relief. It's not overcrowded. So we have something to backfill as well. Ballantyne Elementary, you'll see the number 2 on the left. That represents the small portion of Ballantyne Elementary that we're recommending become part of Hilltop. These are existing families for both 1 and 2. So this would provide sort of instant relief, if you will, for Ballantyne, so that it would have a little bit more room for the growth that's in the remaining portion of its base attendance area. And then the larger darkish pink color hashtag on the left, hashed out area on the left that's labeled as number 3 represents a significant portion of the current Banks Road Elementary base attendance area that we would recommend become part of the Hilltop Needmore area. Some of this community is expecting it because the school's very, very proximate to their community and their subdivisions. Others know it's coming. We've been talking about the school for about 3 years, so they know these recommendations are coming. The difference between the Westlake and the Ballantyne portions for this base area is this also includes growth. So we talked about this over the last couple of years of trying to have a mix of existing families and undeveloped land, and where residential communities are coming online, so the school can open a little bit smaller but grow into its space versus opening full and then us having to reassign 2 or 3 years later. So this is following that same strategy. The other recommendations that we're talking about are related to Middle Creek. So since Westlake Elementary will lose a few students and they don't really need to, and Middle Creek standing to have a big jump in its enrollment, area labeled number 2, we would recommend come from Middle Creek to Westlake. As you can see geographically, it makes a lot of sense. By the exit, or the egress, I should say, and the transportation routes, it makes sense. And then on the left, the one that's labeled number 1, we would recommend this portion become part of Oak Grove. This portion is already assigned to Lefkin Road Middle, which is a multi-track year-round middle school, so there's a bit of a calendar mismatch here today because it's track 4 to a multi-track. So this would create some calendar alignment, K-8 cohort and calendar alignment for these families. We're going to continue to monitor this area because the growth for Middle Creek was a little surprising, but not to be not unrealistic. So we're going to continue to monitor it as we get our 20-day head counts in, our ADM reports, I should say, as we look at what's going on with developments in the region. If we feel it's a little too aggressive for this first year, we might come back with a revision to reduce this just a little bit. We don't want to under-enroll Middle Creek too quickly while they're waiting for the growth to come. And then the next map that you'll see here is, again, related to the opening of Hilltop. As I mentioned, we took a significant portion of the bank's attendance area to create Hilltop in that initial set of recommendations. So this would look to a portion of Vance Road Elementary. As you saw, it was projected to be pretty crowded. It's a relatively smaller campus. Multi-track's not the best option for that campus just because of how small it is. So we're looking to take this area and reassign it from Vance to Banks, which would sort of be the third phase for Vance. As you'll recall, it's been impacted by certain assignment recommendations over the last several years. This area is already aligned to Westlake Middle, so that creates a nice alignment there from a cohort and feeder pattern standpoint. So it would just be an elementary change. All right, so if you were to say yes to all of, if you were to say yes to all of those changes as currently proposed in the initial draft, and if every single student were to take their new assignment in year one, this would be the potential result, the potential impact on the schools. You can see a much better balance across the schools. No one's pushing up against or over 126, 27. We've got some room to grow as we go into 27, 28. Reality, stability transfers will shift these numbers around a little bit, but this gives you an idea of why we're making the recommendations and where we're trying to head. You'll notice that two schools, Banks Road and Westlake Elementary, have those 3 stars beside them and those projected percentages. That's because they're impacted by both a move in and a move out. And so we just wanted to share that this reflects both of those sets of changes. So this really does keep Westlake from changing too much in its enrollment. It does bring Banks down, but it gives it room. As you can see, it has some growth in the remaining portion of its base attendance area. That year-over-year change between 26, 27 and 27, 28 is a good indicator of how much residential development is online in these areas. So if we were to go with the track 4 only recommendation, Hilltop Needmore could open as much as 69% full in its first year, but we know that's not likely to be that full because of the stability transfers, but it might be somewhere close. Which is why we feel comfortable making the track 4 only recommendation for these first few years. There's some room to grow. We're not pushing up against a large growth number there. The next set of recommendations that you see here are what I call complementary recommendations. So with all of those elementary changes, we've accidentally created some K-8 either calendar or cohort misalignment. So we want to clean that up too while we're here. We've learned from our families, just do it all at once. Don't chip away at it. Let's get this done. So we're trying to be responsive to that community feedback as well. Just go ahead and get it all done, especially with those generous stability rules. If I can drive myself, I can stay where I'm at, and I don't have to immediately change to these new schools, but the community will over time. So what we're looking at here are recommendations coming from the existing Dillard Drive Middle or Dillard Drive Magnet Middle and Herbert Akins Road Middle. The Dillard Drive Middle, you'll see labeled as number 1. It is a very small area, impacts a very few students. This is the area that we're recommending come into Westlake Elementary, and it operates on track 4. So we're recommending they go to Westlake Middle on that track 4, be on those same campuses, and have that K and calendar and feeder pattern continuity. The yellow line that's just on top of that is 540, if you're trying to find yourself on the map. The larger circle that's on the lower portion that's labeled number 2 would be portions of current Herbert Akins Road Middle School that would be recommended to become part of Westlake Middle. Herbert Akins is fast growing. There's a lot of development in its remaining base attendance area. It also operates on a multi-track year-round calendar. And having track 4 elementary schools feed into a multi-track year-round middle school creates interesting pressures and dynamics on the school to try to make accommodations for all those students when I have other students coming from other multi-track schools that were also on track 4. So based on the crowding and the calendar misalignment, the recommendation is that basically all of the newly identified Hilltop Needmore base become part of the Westlake community so that the whole school, all 5th grade, would have that cohort as well as calendar continuity. So this is being recommended to support not only K-8 calendar alignment, but K-8 feeder pattern alignment, also to take advantage of available capacity in the region and relieve overcrowding at Herbert Akins Road Middle. The Dillard Drive is really just to align feeder patterns. Dillard doesn't necessarily need that relief, but as a magnet school, we can certainly fill in any available seats through the magnet application process. So when we're looking at these, we'll just kind of put everything together for you. The top layer is if we were to make no changes. So the ones with the blue title, the orange labeled one is if we were to go forward with these recommendations, what the projected impact on the schools are. As you can see, it does provide a modicum of relief to Herbert Akins Road Middle, takes advantage of some available capacity at Westlake Middle, and doesn't significantly impact Dillard Drive Middle. Similarly, there would be some K-12 misalignment if we were to then walk away. So we're making a recommendation at the high school level as well to support K-12 feeder pattern continuity for these families. The recommendation here is that a portion of what is now the Willow Spring High School base attendance area that would be the Hilltop Needmore Elementary base become part of Middle Creek High School. So Hilltop, Westlake, Middle Creek is a nice and sensible sort of K-12 cohort feeder pattern, with the Westlake campus being very, very proximate to the Middle Creek High School campus. In addition, with the growth and crowding in the Willow Spring base attendance area, we are at a point now where we need to relieve them so that they can continue to support the other students that are coming into the remaining portion of their base. So again, this portion that's labeled 1 is recommended to come from Willow Spring to Middle Creek for cohort or feeder pattern alignment, as well as to relieve crowding at Willow Spring High School. Here you see the number differential. As you can see, Willow Spring is creeping up somewhat quickly, projected to be significantly overcrowded soon, and so this would buy us some time and get them right-sized a little bit more. And so that's all of the recommendations that are specifically related to the opening of Hilltop Needmore. The next set of recommendations that we'll talk about are related to following up on recommendations that were approved for the 25-26 school year. So as you can see here, you previously approved a change in base attendance area for the area highlighted with the circle, from either Olive Chapel Elementary or Salem Elementary into Bauckham Elementary. That took them from a multi-track year-round elementary into a traditional elementary. At the time, we weren't quite ready to come up with middle school and high school recommendations to support this change. We asked for grace with the community to bring them to you this year, and so we're honoring that commitment today. What we're recommending is that specifically those two areas, the one that's labeled 1 is currently at Lufkin Road Middle for that multi-track calendar alignment coming out of Olive Chapel. The other section labeled 2 is currently at Salem Middle for that multi-track alignment that they originally had at Salem Elementary. We're recommending they become part of the Apex Middle base attendance area. It's a very logical K-8 feeder pattern for this community to go from Bauckham to Apex Middle. In addition, it creates that K-8 calendar alignment of traditional to traditional. So you can see here the projected impacts. I will draw your attention to the asterisks at Salem Middle. They're going to be part of a set of recommendations later on. This shows the total impact of both sets of moves. So as you can see, it's a little bit of in, a little bit of out to kind of keep them somewhat balanced. This does provide a little bit of relief for Lufkin, which is projected to continue to grow. If you'll recall, the Woods Creek Elementary base attendance area is part of their base. It's rapidly growing. And so we want to make sure that there's space at Lufkin to support the students coming into that community. While Apex doesn't necessarily need additional students, they do serve as an overflow for Apex Friendship. So when that overflow status relationship changes, they can support this long term. This same area had a high school that didn't quite make sense per se. If you're going to go back up in Apex Middle and then back to Apex Friendship High School, very few students go from Apex Middle to Apex Friendship High School. So the community even asked for a little bit more of an Apex cohort alignment. And so we're supporting that here, especially now that Felton Grove is open. This gives us a year to let some of those seniors on stability transfer out before we add more students to the campus. And so this Apex High School can support this long term, but this gives us that one extra year that we needed to allow for some resettling between the schools in this area with the opening of Felton Grove. Apex Friendship will continue to experience growth in the remaining portion of its base attendance area, so we feel that this move supports both schools as well as the community by having a nice K-12 feeder pattern. So again, being recommended for cohort and feeder pattern alignment. You can see here the projected impacts. Apex Friendship is a bit of a low, but there's more, what we say, dirt turning, earth moving in their base attendance area, so this will not be a long-lived recruit. So that's honoring the commitments from last year. The last set of base assignment recommendations we have for you, we looked throughout the district to see where do we have capped or overcrowded schools with nearby available capacity at schools that might be able to support some of that enrollment without having to maybe convert to multi-track or something like that. We know that that sometimes is something we have to think about. But we found two areas in particular, one on the west You'll see on the top left image, I've highlighted for you the area that is the White Oak Elementary base attendance area. The school is aware of how crowded and they are capped and capping, and they have continued growth in their base attendance area. This represents the Mills Park Middle base attendance area. As you are well aware, the school has been capped for a number of years, over 10, I think, at this point. 2012, I believe, was when the cap was originally placed on this school. And while the growth in the northern portion of its base attendance area has slowed, the southern portion has not, particularly the portion that's aligned with White Oak Elementary. And as you can see, we're not done yet. The growth continues in this region, and even with the opening of Parkside Middle in a couple of years, it won't be sufficient enough to properly address the long-standing crowding at Mills Park Middle. In addition, hopefully you'll notice that beside both of these schools to the right, there are some white areas. Those are schools that have a 90% or below utilization rate, that have some available capacity. So really, truly, in response to the community feedback, changing either of these schools to multi-track year-round was just really not well supported. And while that is an individual fact, we have the available capacity nearby, so reassigning students seemed to be the compromise in the middle. So we do have to provide relief to these schools so that they can support their enrollment and perhaps not have to cap out students in the future. So what you'll see here are, we have a little tag along. The areas that are labeled as 1, the top and lower portions of the pink, those are portions of the current White Oak attendance area. These are established neighborhoods, so we are not looking at new development per se. We're looking at existing students. We would recommend that they become part of the Turner Creek Elementary base attendance area. The egress routes are good. There's connection points. Transportation can easily be managed. I don't want to overstate this, but in some cases, they're actually closer to Turner Creek than they are to White Oak. But right, I know that can sound sour, and I don't mean it to be. But practically speaking, they could actually be closer to Turner Creek. The purple area that's labeled 2 is a portion of the current Salem Elementary base attendance area, but it would create a really interesting transportation dynamic in that space, and right now there are very few, I think maybe 1 student. So we're getting ahead of the growth in that particular area before it takes off. So if we can assign those 3 areas into Turner Creek and take advantage of the available capacity there, it does a couple of things for us. 1, it creates transportation efficiencies by bringing those groups together as a whole block. 2, it lets us take advantage of the available capacity at Turner Creek. As you can see, there's a significant amount of space available. And the remaining portions of the Turner Creek base attendance area are low growth, stable areas. There's no new subdivisions coming. So this will allow them to have a population of students that they can support the enrollment of the school. I caution you, remember that those lower numbers are if every student takes the new assignment in year 1. At some of our capped and overcrowded schools, they're very popular. Families may not be ready to leave right away, so I don't know that we'll get to 99% at Turner Creek in year 1, but we certainly have the space to take all of the students should they all eventually find their way over to the school. Because these will be existing to existing, so they'd have those really generous stability rules. However, it does provide relief to White Oak, as you can see, that is desperately needed as there is growth continuing in the remaining portion of their base attendance area as you get closer to the county line. So then this particular set of recommendations for Salem Middle are to relieve Mills Park, but it's really specifically to align the feeder pattern. If you take them from White Oak, it's traditional, and assign them to Turner Creek, that's multi-track. We've now created a calendar mismatch, and we hear from the community whenever possible, can you please give us K-8 calendar alignment? It's not always possible, but here it is. In this portion of the county, we can honor that request. So the 2 areas that are highlighted in blue on the left that are labeled as 1 are currently in the Mills Park Middle base attendance area. We would recommend they be aligned, K-8 calendar continuity, and take advantage of the available capacity at Salem, particularly with the other recommendation we're making to take some Salem students into Apex Middle and align them to Salem Middle. This would create calendar alignment, cohort continuity, and take advantage of the available capacity in the region. This particular area has a significant number of students from Salem Middle going on to Green Level High School, so we're not recommending any high school changes at this time. We think there's a strong enough cohort going that K-12 continuity would be okay. So here you can see the projected impact on the 2 schools, and again, this is if every single student goes in year 1, and again, in this community, I would imagine there would be families that would exercise the stability rule, and this might be more of a trickle effect than a rapid effect. The other set of recommendations related to crowding then are at the east. On the eastern portion of our county, highlighted there for the circle that you see on the left, is circling a majority of the Zebulon Elementary base attendance area, all of the Wakelon base attendance area, Wakelon Elementary base attendance area, and you can see a little couple of areas that are white or yellow. The yellow on the bottom left is Wendell Elementary, getting ready to undergo a major renovation. Can't really add students to that campus, plus they're already at 100%. The closest school in this area that's somewhat proximate is Carver Elementary, and so we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I wanted to highlight for you the unprecedented growth that we're projecting for the eastern part of our county. This is going to be a very new and different experience for this region. It's been pretty stable for a very long time. Wendell Falls came in and really picked things up. The Roseville community had its own experience, but this corridor along 64 and 87 has not experienced this type of growth. I don't know if ever. So we've got a lot of homes that are coming online really quickly. We have a lot of homes that are coming online and maybe going straight to lease, so we're getting people moving in very, very rapidly. In addition to the more traditional single-family homes with offer to purchase contracts, we've got apartments, and it's affordable housing within the county, and some of it also has a decent amount of land, right? You can still get a half an acre or so of land, and that's something that's a little different maybe than other parts of the county. So just, we need to buckle up. You have already approved funding for Marshburn Road Elementary, which is in this general region. We've named Little Creek Elementary in Zebulon, but it has not been approved for funding yet. So we do have some relief coming, but it's in the out years of the CIP. So we do need to address some of the projected crowding today. What you'll see here on this map is that we're looking at this area labeled 1 on the left that's currently assigned to Zebulon Elementary, becoming a part of the Carver Elementary base attendance area. As you can see, there's a part just north that's already assigned to Carver Elementary, so this would create a little contiguous transportation route, if you will. The border on the right is Little Creek, like the actual Little Creek, or Little River, excuse me, Little River. The northern area that is kind of red at the top of the green, for those of you that are familiar with the region, is the old Quarry Road and the railroad track line out there. So it creates a nice contiguous little area to bring students to Carver Elementary. Many of these addresses are Wendell addresses, so hopefully they'll be excited to be able to go to a Wendell address school, yet to be seen. But this would provide a modicum of relief to Zebulon Elementary and take advantage of the today current available space at Carver. And I'm very careful when I say the today available space at Carver. As you can see here, Carver is also projected to experience growth on that northern portion of its attendance area, very proximate to the new Marshburn Road Elementary School. So we know that when Marshburn Road Elementary opens up, it will likely impact Carver Elementary by taking away some of its base attendance area. So by doing this, we're sort of getting ahead of that change a couple of years early and giving them a base attendance area that's a little bit more sustainable long-term when that happens. But as you can see, both schools are going to continue to need our support either way, the growth that's coming to this region. A little plug, Zebulon Magnet Elementary is one of our magnets that's working on market share. They're doing a great job. The other thing that we've got here is that no Carver students today currently go to Zebulon Middle, so for K-8 cohort alignment, we would recommend they come from Zebulon Middle and join Wendell Middle, so they'd have that cohort alignment with all the other Carver students. This is not being done based on capacity or crowding just yet, because the crowding right now is at the elementary level. It will grow forward and impact our middle schools soon, but you'll see here that that area labeled 1 is that same area. And again, we're recommending this just solely for feeder pattern alignment. They're all already assigned to East Wake High School, so this will be the last recommendation in this group. And you can see here again, it's not based on any crowding concerns. It truly is just to create that cohort alignment for students coming out of it. And that's it for the base assignment changes. So we tried to keep it small, knowing we had such a big one last year with the 4 new schools. So we tried to keep it as small as we could. But we do have a couple of calendar application changes. So just as a reminder, we bring these to the board because these do require board approval. What you're seeing here on slide 84 are recommended based on the proposed base assignment changes. So to read this chart, the 2 blue columns are where the students or a particular area might currently be assigned. And that particular area currently sees whatever options that you see in that second column as a calendar application with transportation application option that they can apply for, and if there's seats, they can potentially be seated, and then we'll run a transportation route. The two orange columns on the right represent, well, we're proposing, let's look at that top row, we're proposing that a portion of Banks Road Elementary become part of the Hilltop Needmore Elementary base attendance area. Over the last several years, we've not identified a calendar application school with transportation for our new schools, partly for transportation efficiency and partly to make sure the schools have room. And with our recommendation that Hilltop be multi-track year-round but operate track 4, it's not the same as the other types of tracks. So we're recommending they just wouldn't have a calendar application with bus. Let me be very, very clear. They can still apply for magnets and transfers and anything else based on their individual hardship needs, and we can potentially approve those. Just if they're approved, they would not have district transportation, particularly if it was a transfer. Some magnet options obviously come with transportation, and so none of that changes. If you go down to the bottom, slightly different, Zebulon Magnet currently has Carver as its modified or year-round calendar application option. Well, if it's assigned to Carver in its base, then obviously it wouldn't need an application. So 84 shows you some other schools that are impacted already don't have a calendar application option, so they didn't need to be included in this set of recommendations. You'll notice maybe like a Westlake's not up here. They didn't have one to begin with, so it's okay. The ones you see on slide 85, we've been really working hard to reduce the split transportation areas. I mean, if you'll recall, in our heyday when we had quite a bit of transportation, we could opt for sometimes more than one calendar application choice with transportation, which means that for some of these areas, I could have a bus coming in for base students. Let's use that Abbott's Creek example. I could have a bus coming into that same neighborhood to pick up kids and take them to multi-track Brassfield. I could also have a third bus coming in to take students from that same neighborhood to multi-track Durant. It's just not sustainable for us long-term to keep offering two options and sometimes any. So what we're looking at with the Abbott's Creek recommendation is Abbott's Creek currently has Brassfield multi-track year-round and Durant year-round track 4 as calendar application options. We looked at the numbers. The impact was less severe if we reduced to Durant. And Durant is much more proximate to the school and to the base attendance area. So our recommendation is that the students at Brassfield be assigned to Durant, and then they could participate in any of the transfer processes if they'd like to, if they didn't want to go to Durant for year-round. Or they could do the stability transfer to Brassfield and provide their own transportation. Hodge is a little bit different. They're a year-round track 4 school that currently has 2 traditional calendar application options with less than 5 students using both options altogether. So we're creating 2 really, really inefficient bus routes for very few students. So our recommendation would be to just drop the calendar applications, clearly not popular with this community, and then to just offer those families that are impacted the ability to do a stability transfer if they'd like to drive themselves and stay. There are more, but a lot of them are tied to other assignment concerns that we have, and we thought it'd be too much too fast for families and that we should wait until let's say calendars are changed, maybe a North Forest Pines or a Pleasant Union that you're going to talk about later today. It would be unfair to make those changes before you've had any of those conversations. So there's about 22 or 23 more of these still out there, so we'll be bringing them to you as it's appropriate, but also balance stability for families in with the conversation. At the middle school level, then the only proposed calendar application changes we're making are truly based on the recommended base assignment changes. So for the top 2, just recommending taking away the calendar application altogether. For the bottom 3, rearranging and resorting based on the new base. So Apex middle students have Lufkin Road Middle as a year-round calendar option. Salem middle students have Apex as a traditional option. So maintaining that for as long as we can. In this area with the crowding, this actually does help us some to move students around. So we wanted to maintain that option for families with this initial set of recommendations. And with that, I'll remind everybody that all of this information is on our 2026 enrollment proposal site. I feel like it's probably hitting records, right, for touch points. The assignment planning page will obviously be maintained. And then where do we go from here? So we're pretty deep into our assignment planning cycle with you as a board. Some community members may be plugging in for the first time. So anybody who's joining us for the first time in this conversation and hasn't been along for the ride since March 4th, we just encourage you to go to the website, encourage you to look at the board materials. All of the data and evidence and public engagement feedback that was used to form these recommendations, it's all available on our sites and in those board materials. After today, we won't come back to you officially until October 21st. We're going to give ourselves 6 weeks to do some virtual information sessions, to gather some questions and feedback from principals, and to also work with our area superintendents. We're going to take all of that information and bring it back together to see if any revisions need to be made. I kind of gave you an idea, maybe like the Middle Creek Elementary example. Do we need to make adjustments there? Is it too much, too fast? We also will have an open house. It's scheduled for September 24th. We're going to host it at the Hilltop Needmore Elementary site. The principal at Fuquay-Varina Elementary has been gracious enough to host us there. So that'll be good. And then that'll be an opportunity for people to come meet the principals of their new schools. We'll have some tabling and resources from our district resources available so families can get questions about before and after school care, transportation, those sorts of things. Very similar to the format that we used last year. And then we'll come back to you on October 21st with any recommended revisions, a full update on what we have public engagement-wise so that you'll have a completely updated public engagement summary report before you go into your public hearing that'll follow that same night. Thank you for agreeing to move it up. We received a lot of feedback from families and community members that doing it in November just felt way too close to the final approval date, that it didn't feel as if there was enough time to be responsive to the feedback. So thank you for agreeing to move it up so that we'll have that time. What we'll do then between October 21st and November 18th is get to you a fully updated copy of any of the materials that you need based on that public hearing so that you'll have them in hand when we come to have a final conversation with you on November 18th with the final set of recommendations and request your approval of the plan. So that's what we'll be doing in the interim. I mentioned all of this already. There's our website, Mr. Malone's favorite website. And then we turn it over to you, Chair Hagerty, and the board for any initial thoughts, questions, clarifying questions, whatever it is that you need. This is your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Pulliam. Board members, you've seen the presentation. I think we're all excited about opening a new elementary school. And then you've also seen staff's recommendations for addressing other issues around crowding, capacity, and then also that cohort alignment, which is so important, keeping kids and families together through most of their academic progress if we can. Opening it up for questions, I see Ms. Evans.
Thank you. On slide 46, you mentioned kids that feed into Lufkin. Can you tell me where that is again?
So that would be the group that we're recommending coming from Middle Creek Elementary to Oak Grove.
Okay.
And that would create a K-8 calendar and feeder alignment, Oak Grove to Lufkin. That's a very natural feeder for that area. They're the only students from Middle Creek Elementary currently that go to Lufkin, so it's a bit of a disconnect for that area.
Thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. Thanks for all of that. That's a lot of information. On page 45, there is on the top of Vance, all the way up to the top, is another, looks like Valentine Elementary School?
Yes.
So that is not going to change?
Correct. That's one of their satellite areas, talking with the school and the principal. They're comfortable keeping that assignment area, and from a numbers perspective, it makes sense for us. So at this time, we don't have a recommendation for that area.
Okay. And
I want to show you.
is that a commuting issue? It looks like it's just a lot. I mean, we're squaring everything off, which I think is...
This is a little bit tighter map plan. Do you know the distance? I can't remember.
Don't know the exact distance.
Because this is so zoomed in. It's not as far as it may appear, but there is a commuting factor, yes. But the transportation route, I think, is probably pretty streamlined, looking at Mr. Strickland, where it's probably a single bus that goes, picks up the students and brings them in. So the route's probably actually pretty efficient.
Okay.
There's a significant number of students in that area.
There is, okay. So it works well. It just looks like it's all the way across. Okay.
They're filling the bus with
Okay.
buses, actually.
And we are continuing to look at all of that, but balancing it against the other pillars of the assignment plan, it is challenging.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure you said we're going to talk about North Forest Pines.
At the board meeting?
Okay. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Caulfield. Any other questions about the plan at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Pulliam. I'm so sorry. Thank you, as always, for an amazing job in such a short time that you present this. Just a simple question. On your page 15, where you share the participation numbers, will this be your methodology moving forward with parents? I heard you mention something that you did a little bit more outreach and connectivity, and you had other supports, and you got more feedback, like almost 1,000 people more feedback. So you find this method a little bit more efficient?
What we're finding is that if we can offer sessions virtually and asynchronously, we actually really do get more participation. When we host in-person sessions, and I'll refer you to your engagement summary, we get maybe a 1% return rate. But when we do something online, where they can watch online, or they can watch a recording, or they can participate online, we tend to get magnitudes more participation. One of the ways that we're expanding, I'm glad you asked, is I'm going to mess up the name, Corelli, Community, Lisa?
The Community Connections, our community partnership newsletter. We sent it out. That reaches folks who don't have children in the system, who might not necessarily get our traditional communications. And if we ask community partners to send it out on our behalf to churches, to community groups, etc.
And so that's a new tool in our toolbox this year that we will be leveraging very hard.
Very good. Thank you.
Any further questions? There's a lot here to absorb, and I'm sure from the public seeing it for the first time, they'll have lots of feedback as well. So, Ms. Pulliam, thank you for sharing the timeline. Thank you for sharing the plan. And unless there's anything else, that'll conclude our discussion of draft 1 of the assignment plan for today. We do have some additional time. At this point, I'd like to entertain any motion to move into closed session to consider some of the items on our closed session agenda prior to going into our general business meeting. We have a motion from Vice Chair Swanson that we move into closed session. We have a second from Mr. Hershey. Trying to look, this will be the board will move into closed session to consider confidential personal information protected under GS 143, 31811, A6, and 115C319, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privileges provided for in GS 143, 31811, A3, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the client privileges provided in GS 143, 31811, A3 due to current litigation. Also to consult with the board attorney employed and retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and consult and instruct board staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken on or behalf of the board on the particulars of the acquisition of real property interests for public infrastructure improvements related to Swift Creek Elementary Schools and the associated site, and to receive the board's instruction as to the position to be taken on behalf of the board in said negotiation. And then finally, to consider any confidential student information protected under GS 115C402 and the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. A lot of stuff.
Can you say that again?
All in favor of the Vice Chair's motion to move to closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll move to the closed session at this time. We'll give the conference room a few moments to clear, and then we'll reconvene.